Good morning. This is Lori Schmidt, the Wolf Curator at the International Wolf Center in Ely, and you are viewing the exhibit pack, and this is one of two packs that we maintain at the International Wolf Center. So the exhibit pack consists of 4 wolves, and we are seeing a fecal sample there. We just ran a fecal sample actually on Axel here the other 2 days ago. So we do monitor scat. That is an important part for us. We do check the coloration and see if they've been consuming. We do feed our wolves a little bit differently than you might feed your average dog. They are designed to have a feast and famine digestive system. That means that wolves are capable of eating, 20% of their body weight at any given time. In the wild, they may not make a kill every day, obviously, so they might make a kill every 7 to 10 days. So their bodies kind of have designed to have stomach receptors that absorb a large quantity of food. And like I say, they can eat up to 20% of their body weight at one time. And so we tend to feed in that kind of feast and famine kind of diet, will allow them to gorge. What we find with wolves, if you give them small amounts every day, they have this kind of concept of wolfing down their food, I think is a phrase you've heard, eating extremely quickly, getting very competitive about it, and then again, not having that satiation of having a full stomach. So it is kind of part of their biology as well as part of their behavior that they do maintain kind of that diet. Our second pack is in retirement, and we only have one retired pack member here, and that's Gryzor. Gryzor had his breakfast. Did Gryzor eat his breakfast? Gryzor ate his breakfast, and Gryzor actually is starting a course of antibiotics today. We noticed yesterday's check, he was fine. He didn't eat a lot, but that's not uncommon for him. So the whole lack of competition with feeding, that whole idea that he's going to be 16 here in a few weeks, he doesn't eat as ravenously. He used to when he was younger, but now he just kind of has a little bit slower diet. So he ate all his breakfast. He's getting 3 pounds of meat a day. And then yesterday afternoon, so we obviously are here. There's 4 wolf care staff here that are core staff. And we, when I came in yesterday afternoon, we actually had to close off this little viewing area. So that's where he gets to have face-to-face pack activity. You can see his tail wagging there, having a good time greeting. It's Grayson who's really spending most of the time greeting. You can see on the other side, if I pass over there, that's Denali and Grayson. And Grayson's really kind of, oh, sorry, that's Axel. It was Grayson, I thought for a while, but that's Axel. So anyways, you can see pretty good excitement on both sides. That's good stimulus for Gryzor. And so again, yesterday afternoon, we go in and close this because we don't want it overnight, even though it's gated and chained. That's a risk, and we always assess risk here. And so we lock it at night. And when we went in, we noticed that he had a little bit of swelling in the lower part of his face. So he has had a tooth removed, a premolar removed, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, that was infected. And it looks like he might have another kind of premolar abscess on this left side. So he's going to be 16. And the vets obviously are very concerned about anesthesia. And so we are not, the vet's recommendation is it's too risky to drug this 16-year-old for something that could very well be controlled with antibiotics. And so we've we had a course last October, we had a course in January, and now we have a different antibiotic treating this. And that's our best bet right now. The fact you can kind of see it a little bit as he walks by, there's just a little bit of a lump there right by that premolar in his upper jaw. And the reality is, again, we always risk, we always assess. This is a risk here, to drug him. It's a risk if it gets infected, but if it does go away with antibiotics, which it has in the past, we want to treat it that way first. The other thing we're doing is we're switching a different type of antibiotic because we know about bacteria, and bacteria becomes resistant if you expose it to the same kind of antibiotic. And so we're switching it up a little bit and making sure that we do a different course. So that's a part of kind of what's going on. So this is one of the reasons why there has to be 4 people kind of at minimum managing the wolves. And so we have more than that in the wolf care staff, but what we do is during this time, those people are in reserves, and those people are at a stay-at-home order. We have a stay-at-home order from the governor in Minnesota here until May 4th. And so if one of us gets sick, we have backup. And rather than all of the wolf care team coming in and handling things in lab and having a risk exposure by having only 4 people, you minimize that risk. So I wanted to start out with that. So like say, you can see Gryzor coming in and out of that area, checking it out. It's great mental stimulus for a wolf who's 16, going to be 16. May 5th is his birthday. And that's been good for us. He's maneuvering. We still have a lot of ice. We are at 25 degrees this morning. We thought we were going to get spring, and then we got snow yesterday, and now Sunday through Tuesday is another 1 to 3 inches predicted. The reality is these kind of ice conditions do not go away without nighttime temperatures staying above freezing. And this is literally ice cubes, and now we're at 25 degrees. And if we, it'll be 11 o'clock before we get above freezing, and then we're above freezing until maybe 3 o'clock, and then we're below freezing again. It's very challenging to get rid of this stuff. And the biggest challenge we have is when we shoveled the roof this winter, we needed a place to put the snow. So we put it in our pond. So we have this big, colossal pile of snow. Somewhere under there is a pond. And so we are not making any headway in melting that. So like I said, the procedure here for these webinars on Friday is just to give you a chance to kind of see the pack, ask any questions that you might have, be able to, maybe discuss anything that you witnessed on the webcams. We certainly are willing and able to talk about things, and we actually appreciate the opportunity to share, information with people, from the standpoint of what is going on here. But equally important to us, people can share information. Says, hey, I saw Gryzor slip, or I saw Gryzor have a hard time getting up. If you could tell me the time, that would be great. And I see the time is off on this camera again. In the pack holding area, I will reset that again. I've reset it a dozen times, and I'm not certain what's going on with that. But if you can just say on this camera, I saw this time and this date, that really helps us to be able to search the video and try to come up with that information. So there's a question here: how many wolves are in the enclosure in total? We have 4. So we have 2 Arctic wolves, and that's Axel and Grayson. They were born in 2016, so they will be 4 on May 2nd. We have 1 Great Plains subspecies. That's like a Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin subspecies. That is Bolts. He just turned 8 on March 17th. He was a St. Patty's Day wolf. He may be in this, what's called this medical pen here. We keep this gate open. Bolts is a little bit shyer, doesn't have a true litter mate in there, doesn't do as well with kind of tension. So we give him the medical pen, and this is just an area, it's a kennel area, and it's got a roof over it, it's got walls so it stays snow-free, and it's got heated water in there. It's got actually a pail. If we want to put some additional food in there, we have it available. And he uses that because it's a narrow chute that goes into the kennel. So he can go into the kennel and then face these guys and kind of deal with tension where he doesn't have to come out. Looks to me like he's in there. Axel is over here kind of waiting for Gryzor to come back. Axel's usually the source of somebody's tension. Axel's a very active, young, 3 going on 4-year-old wolf. He doesn't have a lot of boundaries. Nobody's really putting him in a place of showing him rules, boundaries, and limitations, as the phrase goes. I've been working on it, been trying. He's been a little bit challenging this winter without leadership in the pack. And so we've been working on doing some positive conditioning, some rolling over. You might notice when we do wolf care, we have trained people that obviously do wolf care, and you might notice some of us are trying to roll him over on a regular basis. The good thing is that the timing is helping calm things down. So by timing, I mean spring, even though it doesn't appear that way, and we get snow, it doesn't seem like spring is happening. The reality is we are seasonally having more daylight. We are having, again, a little bit of an influence on the wolves' patterns of activity. And we look to scientists to tell us, again, what's the natural cycle? What's the hormonal cycle of wolves? Again, our wolves are neutered. All of our males here are neutered. Our females spayed. We don't have a female right now, but that's a pattern that we used. We don't reproduce wolves here. There are 3 different subspecies, meaning they would not geographically mix in the wild. And so we don't reproduce wolves here. That means that, again, we rely on our veterinarians to tell us the healthiest way to be able to maintain that. And we've been here since 1989. So what's healthy now and what's in the science now about birth control wasn't available to us in 1989. So when we chose to spay and neuter, that was a decision that's very old, meaning 31 years ago, we made that decision. And what that means now is that even though there might be better things on the market, although some of our vets say, no, this is still the healthiest way to manage these wolves. The reality is we wouldn't change up, meaning I wouldn't have a neutered male in with a male who had some kind of hormonal control, because that can be challenging. And as you can see here, this is Axel. He's doing a stock. Yes, Bolt must be in there because he's doing a kind of a posture with a T2 tail and stalking over there. He's got to focus on Bolts. And part of it is because Bolts shows a little bit of weakness. And weakness is how wolves, their DNA is designed to identify weakness, whether it be elk or moose or deer that they're hunting. They look for weakness, they target that, and each other they target it. Yep. So Bolts gets power. I call it by letting him have that face off. He gets confidence, he gets control, he gets power. So this is posturing. This is definitely the circumstance that we're dealing with right now. Axel's kind of, let's see what I can get away with. Let's see if you're showing a little bit of weakness. Now, this morning when I got here, it was a completely different scenario. Axel and Grayson were kind of posturing a little bit, but Bolts was running around trying to roll in front of Denali, wagging his tail, all excited. This posturing started because they fed Gryzor. And so every action around here has an equal and opposite reaction. And so by feeding Gryzor, we get a little bit of stimulus or competition for food. Remember, they're mentally designed to gorge, to see food, to eat it. Wolves are always liking to eat food. And so by the fact that Gryzor got fed, the exhibit pack, again, triggered a little bit by temperature, a little bit colder. They got a little ramped up. They have 4 beaver coming later tonight. So they're ready to eat. They fed on Tuesday. We did feed a little bit of extra meat yesterday because, again, temperatures got cold again. And so we fed a little bit of meat extra yesterday. But the ravens here are the main reason why we don't feed large quantities in the middle of the day. I made that mistake on Tuesday. I fed 40 pounds of chicken and pork. And I thought the ravens were already in their nesting patterns and that they had gone less congregation like they do in the off season. Well, lo and behold, it was so noisy here. And I'm not sure if you're watching with the webcams, but the ravens were so noisy. And then we had eagles showing up and they got a lot of the resource. And so scavengers will take a lot of the resource. And so usually we feed later in the day. So Friday tonight, the staff will feed after 5 because by that time the ravens kind of start settling down for the night. And that'll give the wolves time to gorge overnight and then, not lose lots of scavengers. So that's kind of what's going on. So there's a couple of questions. I'll answer them so that I make sure I get through all the questions before we end here. So Debbie asked, is Axel getting more used to having the gate open for Gryzor? And you can see that there. He's watching. He's in what's called a T3 tail. It's down. It's not straight out. It's not over the back, excited like a T1 wagging. Gryzor is indifferent to that. So the reality is we are seeing less activity. We've been doing this every day since last Friday's webinar. That was the first day that we tried it. And then actually I think I missed on one day because I was doing other programming, but pretty much every day. And then since I believe Wednesday, I've now been leaving it open all day. So in other words, I'm here in the lab 5 days a week. Pretty much from 8 until 5. And so I watching from the camera, you know, making sure obviously I have the mics on. So if I hear anything, I got a window outside, you know, I can just look and see that they're getting ramped up, and I'll go in and intervene. But at this point, it's relaxing and it's good stimuli. There's no doubt for both of them. If Axel, of course, Axel's posturing right now to wait for bolts to come out. So the wolf care staff is about, the wolf care staff are about to do meds. And so that's some of the posturing going on right now. Actually, I'm not sure where they are in wolf care. They're probably still in with Gryzor here. And let me just, oh, Gryzor's looking. So you can see over there, Gryzor's still looking. So let me go back. Yep, Axel gets up. He's got a T2 tail, but nothing excited. I mean, they're going back and forth. And like I said, it's really kind of fun to have these cameras because I can keep a track of what, you know, how much time is Gryzor getting up and stand in and looking at him. Really want to make sure that this wolf at this age has got some mental stimuli. You know, I think that's a very, very important part. Certainly as humans, you know, we're talking about isolation and what it means for the humans. You know, we don't know, again, there's a lot of research going on. We have been watching some research that have been coming out of a few universities about cognitive dysfunction, about, you know, cognitive abilities of animals. You know, there's even some studies going on about empathy. You know, do animals have empathy for each other? I know there's been many publications about strategic cooperation. You know, that wolves hunting, it's more than just running at something. It's you know, communication, whether through ear posture, eye posture, body language, tail postures, etc. Somehow wolves express a way to structure a hunt that it's more than just a bunch of animals running at something and hoping to catch something, that there's strategy involved. And so understanding that is a challenge for people who study animal behavior, because obviously they can't tell us, they can't talk and say, yep, that's what I was up to. So we have to interpret. And so, you know, again, I saw a little yawn there on Axel. So another yawn there. That, again, is not necessarily tired. That is can be stress induced. So definitely want to keep an eye. This is probably something that's causing him a little anxiety, that Bolts is not out. And Bolts has been in and out. It's not like he's hiding in there. He just uses it to his advantage when he wants to. So I guess a couple of other questions. We have any update on the pup status? Again, that is a conversation that is going on with the Wolf Center, and we will make sure that everyone is informed. Obviously, we have a large organization. We have staff, we have board, we have wolf care staff, we have people with former pup care, we have members. So all of that is going to be something that we discuss, and we will make sure we communicate in an effective manner. I think it's important for people to understand that every decision we make in wolf care, including, you know, like I said with Gryzor, you know, do I take him down to pull a tooth and risk anesthesia at that age for something that we can manage with antibiotics? These are all things that we have to assess. These are all things that we have to discuss. And so every decision, including, you know, the 4 core wolf care staff that are managing here, pups, you know, what happens without pups, all these things are being discussed, and every angle has got to be laid out. I mean, so we're looking at, you know, again, how is Denali doing? You know, is Denali going to be, you know, able to manage this pack? And we can tell you right now, Denali's doing great, other than the fact that that wolf has the ability to find any pill that is hidden in anything and lick everything around it. So yesterday we did what's called a Perfecto Treatment. So we treat for ticks. We don't have fleas here this far north, but we do have ticks. So we've been having reports that the deer ticks are out, and even though we don't have white-tailed deer coming into the pen unless they've been frozen for 2 weeks, we do have white-tailed deer that are on our driveway. We have white-tailed deer that are next to the fence. We have the ability of transferring Lyme's, you know, ticks that carry Lyme's disease. So we're very concerned about that. So we do a tick treatment. So everybody got their tick treatment yesterday except Big D. Denali here, we cut it up into little squares. We put bacon grease on it. We put it in butter. We put it in venison cakes. We put it with kibble. So even though the size and shape of the Perfecto looked just like kibble, he managed to find it. And so he has not gotten his Perfecto treatment yet. Everybody else has. And one of the reasons why we do this tick treatment is, and I'm trying to find Big D there, so bear with me as I monitor the camera. They have such thick hair. So the tick season comes out, and these deer ticks are pencil lead thin, small deer ticks that can cause Lyme's disease, and obviously that causes issues. So right now we're doing meds. The Perfecto treatment, they actually have to hold off on that till I'm in there, because we want to make sure that if he drops it, that another wolf doesn't get it, and which he will. He'll take it over, he'll drop it, and he'll investigate. That's just his regular meds. He gets a vitamin, he gets Dasequin, and gets Durlactin for his joints. But we can't give a treatment, something that is a medical thing that we want to control the amount of quantity that a wolf gets without having a person in the pen being able to block and pick it up so that another wolf doesn't get it. So that's kind of what's going on right now. And looks like he's cashing it. So today is not a Perfecto day. So one of the things we have to do is wait until, again, feast and famine, till they feel a little bit hungrier, and then we'll try to get it in them. This happens every month. We do a heartworm ivermectin treatment for, your standard heartworm dose. We do that every month because typically with heartworm, you need a blood draw to make sure that you don't have it in the spring. Heartworm is transmitted by mosquitoes. And we have mosquitoes. I mean, I saw a mosquito fly last week, even though we still have snow. So rather than, and in order to get a blood draw, we have to drug our wolves. So rather than drug them just to get a heartworm treatment, ivermectin is a great parasite control. We just do it all year long. So first of the month, ivermectin is out. And the best times to do ivermectin are pre-feeding days. In other words, the day before a deer comes out, when they're really kind of hungry and they're ramped up and they're willing to take stuff. So like I said, Bolts is not coming out yet. This was triggered again by Gryzor getting fed, probably triggered by 25 degrees. He wasn't like that when I got here this morning. Triggered by competition. Food competition is an issue. Bolts, and I think when I started this webinar series, I talked about neophobia. And neophobia is fear of new things. Bolts was about 30 days old when he came to this site. So he's had a life of, so in other words, that's an old pup to be socialized to an exhibit. So in other words, meaning that, wolves have windows of socialization when they tolerate things, they tolerate places, they tolerate design of facility, they tolerate, people and all those kinds of things. So Bolts was older when he got here, and so that means he didn't acclimate all that well to the kind of the components that we call an exhibit. And so he's a little bit more timid. That timid behavior means he's a little bit weaker. They see that and a little bit more anxious. They see that as weakness and they kind of pick up on it. So I see his tail is still down. It's T3.5, meaning it's down, it's touching his haunches, but he's taking his meds. And he'll be better when the meds are done, because that's food competition, and that's kind of one of the challenges that we have here. So that's something. Bolts is a special case. He's my, to me, Bolts is my 90% of my obligations here are to the wolves that don't have it easy. Denali, anybody can manage Denali. I mean, other than getting him meds. Denali is an easygoing wolf. Denali's got some aging hip issues, but he's an easygoing wolf. Pretty much anybody can vaccinate him. Pretty much anybody can drug him. Axel, same thing. Grayson, a little bit less. Gryzor, same thing. Anybody can vaccinate Gryzor. He's a piece of cake to vaccinate. Bolts is my special wolf. He requires some very, very calm understanding to handle him, and he's a sweetheart. So I really want to make sure that he is. Has the respect he needs and the understanding for the life that he has. So there's a question. Hey, Kim Bob, what meds supplements is Gryz on for his joints? Gryz is not on any meds. Gryz, meaning pharmaceutical prescription drugs, other than the antibiotics today. But Gryzor does take turmeric each morning. He takes Durlactin, which is a milk protein. He takes Dasequin. He takes a vitamin B. He takes milk thistle for his liver, all of which are nutritional supplements. And boy, you know what? He does great. He is 16, And boy, this guy is, oh, there's a raven sneaking into these ravens, they're even sneaking into the caches for the old guys. But Gryzor is 16, and he, you know, other than that ACL tear, and I feel so bad about that. Years ago, we didn't have the retirement enclosure set up where we had protected roofs, and, you know, we had a lot of compaction where they're walking, and he slipped between going through gates. Here he comes. So he slipped going through gates, and he tore his ACL. That was probably like 5 years ago. And I feel bad because that again, at that time was repairable. Again, the risk assessment at that time was, boy, these ACL tears have a long recovery where you have to keep them, you know, immobile, and you have to keep them not using that leg, and that's just not an option for him. So we let it heal on his own. But, you know, and again, why I feel responsible for that is because, you know, I'm in charge of the facility. I mean, that's my job as the wolf carrier, is to make sure that those areas are safe. So I've tried to do improve on that. You can see here a tremendous improvement. If you just look at where he's walking here, look at this whole area here compared to this area on the right. That is problematic for old knees. This is like a walk in the park. It's great, and that's again, the Working for Wolves crew did a tremendous job helping us get that far. Vermilion students have done a tremendous job. We're not quite there yet, but we're very close. Having these areas so well protected for our old timers, and that's really important to us. So, but as far as the joint stuff, Kim, you know, he moves around. I mean, you know, I don't get out of my chair as well as he gets up, and I'm also on turmeric actually. Before I even gave turmeric, I read a lot about it. There's some pros and cons about it, you know, about how it lowers blood sugar, and, you know, and problems. You know, there's even been some anecdotal things about cancer, and we've not had, again, the risk assessment. We feel Gryzor's movement has been so much better since we started him on it. You know, and he has none of these issues that Aiden and Denali had with these small lumps, or he doesn't even have any fatty cysts. You know, he's 118 pounds, which is great weight for a 16-year-old. His peak was 125 when he was about 6. Actually, he had 125 earlier this year. So he has been teetering around that peak weight. And he feels good. He's got a thick coat of hair. And so that's kind of where we're at with him, and making sure that he stays healthy. So back in the exhibit pack, they finished meds, see the difference. Now the competition's done, and Bolts is fine. I can come out, you know, it's over. It's a psychological state. That's why it's so important for people not to, like, you know, jump the gun and say, oh, you need to take Bolts out because he's having a bad day. No, you know, social behavior is important. Tension is part of dominance, you know, and making these life-changing decisions where we pull them out of something, I'd rather alter and manage than, you know, try to find some ways to make him conducive than take away his social network. So that's Grayson over there trying to talk to Gryzor. Grayson does probably a little bit more whining towards Gryzor, and they've been nose to nose. Bolts equally, as you saw last week when I first started that, they get along pretty well. I think some of Axel's posturing towards Bolts was that Axel just wanted to get in the medical pen. Axel kind of wants to be where everybody else is, and he wants to control things. And so that makes it a little challenging when Bolts was possibly blocking some food sources or something like that. So I got a comment here from Deb and Bill wanting to thank the center for they've enjoyed the preschool story time, Howling from Home, and Friday morning opportunities. Thank you so much. I hear really good things. I'm not able to watch the preschool story time. We're typically still doing wolf care during that time, but I hear there's some really fun things going on. I really appreciate the opportunities. Certainly, I'm old school. You know, I started working with wolves in 1986. We didn't have cameras. We didn't have ways to communicate. So I'm a novice at running some of this stuff. I know now that I'm teaching online at the college, and I'm seeing what some of my younger colleagues are able to do. And it is pretty amazing to be able to see, you know, what's going on, and how people are connecting. And, you know, I still like face-to-face. There's no doubt. You know, a lot of people, you know, need that kind of social companionship. I work with social carnivores. They're obviously face-to-face, you know, so social behavior is a very important part of it. So we're doing everything we can to keep wash your hands, to take Clorox wipes and wipe down every door handle, every gate, wipe out, information that will, viruses that will, be hanging around. We've read every publication that we can about how long does it stay on surfaces, what are some temperature related issues, what are the solutions that we need to control this. And so we're doing everything that we can to make sure that wolves are, again, not exposed to anything. Obviously, the news this week about a tiger in the Bronx Zoo who tested positive for COVID-19 has us all questioning what this virus could do. Certainly that's a zoonotic, meaning a human virus going to an animal or vice versa. Is something that we study, and we know the traditional zoonotics, but as a novel virus, we always want to make sure of that. So I'm trying to wear a face, a bandana. A face mask is a little concerning just because of the elastic, and it's new. It would probably be very exciting for Axel to snap elastic strings on my face. So I'm not there yet. I'm, again, using a bandana. Unfortunately now, because it's cold, I'm using a scarf because it's still winter here. So that is something that we're kind of working on. So I'm just going to explain here that we are feeding out a little bit extra food just because, again, that tension. We're giving them some frozen meat that allows them to kind of chew on to distract them a little bit. So I've asked those guys to just block up some frozen chunks of ground beef. And because Bolts had a little bit of tension there, I don't want to magnify anything. So I want to give them a little bit of something to occupy their time. This bone dust that we give is always thawed. So therefore it's, easy for them to grab and then be done. With these frozen chunks, they can go lay down. I gave them, I think 3 pounds yesterday, just enough to take the edge off a little bit. Once it starts getting warm, by 11 o'clock, they're sleeping. They've got a thick winter coat, and it gets up to 40. They're hot. So that's what's going on right now. It's just a little bit of that frozen beef to be able to kind of take the edge off a little bit. And Grayson's been a little hungry. This wolf is tough for us to manage. He again is lower ranking. He's a little bit more timid than his brother. He gives up very easily. If somebody confronts him on a carcass, he gives up very easily. So tonight, I think it's one of the questions Susan asked, we'll be feeding. It'll be 5 o'clock Central Time. We'll be wheeling in the beaver, those 4 beaver that we have. We take the stomach out because the wolves don't eat the stomach. Stomach is all vegetable matter. It's not something that they consume. So we take the stomachs out. We stuff a couple of chickens in the stomach. We leave them the heart, the lungs, the liver, intestinal tract. They can, they may or may not eat that. Usually they just kind of lay it, drag it around. So we leave that for stimuli, and then we stuff a few extra pieces in there. Last week is the first time we did that. They're pretty excited to find a chicken in there. So I think they're looking forward to the feeding tonight. And we'll spread it out because we want Grayson to have one and we want Grayson to defend one. So Dylan asked, are there books about wolf behavior? To me, there's a couple of really good books. I think one of the books that I really like is a combination of, and I don't have the title here right now, but a combination of research periodicals that were put together. It was authored by Dave Meach and Luigi Biottani from Italy. And it's a combination of articles about wolves. We have it in our store. And sorry if Dave's watching. I can't believe I forgot the name of the book, but I also forgot where I put my keys. So I am getting a little older. So some of my memory is not intended to be disrespectful. But you can find it on our website. Again, it's Ecology and Behavior of Wolves. It's a great article or a great book, because what I love about it is it's not just behavior. It talks about hormones. Cheryl Asa does a piece talking about the endocrine cycle and this whole idea of estrus and pre-estrus and breeding behavior. And wolves don't breed any time of the year. Wolves only breed in here in North America in February and March timeframe. And so the reality is that breeding pattern is cyclical, and so behaviors are cyclical. So what I really like about it is having that opportunity. So that would be my first go-to book, and it also has a lot of understanding, a lot of explanation about genetics, and about this understanding about subspecies. Ron Nowak wrote a really good piece about this understanding about subspecies and geographic differences and dispersal and that kind of behavior. So I would say that is my go-to book. Dave Meach will tell you the 1970s book, The Wolf, he would tell you, take that off the shelf. That's old science. You know, I still have it on my shelf. Sorry, Dave. But the reality is, you know, things are always changing in the wolf world. The more knowledge we have, the more understanding we have, the more genetics comes into play, certainly is going to give us more knowledge. So I think it's really, really important to not just look at books, but to watch the scientific publications. You know, I'm a member of the Wildlife Society, and I look to, you know, Wildlife Society Bulletin, but I also look to magazines like the Canadian Naturalist that gives us information, you know, especially for us in North America. Canada has a much higher population of wolves than we do in the United States. So research coming out of Canada, you know, can give us some insight about populations in remote wildland areas and in the influence of humans. I think there's a lot of people saying, you know, the changes going on right now in the human race and how we move about this planet, you know, certainly has created a change in climate, some people are saying, and some people are saying, you know, maybe, you know, social distancing is going to mean less trampling of vegetation, you know, less changes, less congregation in, and maybe more wild spaces will recover. I think there's even a concept out there in ecology called rewilding, which has been a little controversial, but I think the reality is wolves are in a circumstance where you're going to find their behaviors are always evolving with how humans interact, how climate interacts. Obviously, we know their prey species are climate driven. So, you know, moose populations and how they respond to warm summers has been research that has been going on. So Wolf Care are continuing to work. Now they're going to move into the exhibit pack. So the scat bucket is a joyous job, especially when scat is frozen and you have to pry it out with your feet. And that's Leanne's job. You'll notice as she goes around with the scat bucket, it is very, very important that the Wolf Care staff are all consistent. No eye contact, no vocalization, no approaching wolves. You know, we want those wolves to understand the scat bucket is a cutoff signal. You do not approach the handlers when they have the scat bucket. That's how we get new people in. And certainly we have obviously opportunities to bond with pups so they grow up and trust us. But there are people who come into our exhibit who have to meet old wolves, you know, old wolves who don't have a trust. That doesn't mean that those wolves are going to maybe, you know, just hop up and say, hey, you're new, I love you, give me a vaccine. That's not going to happen. The reality is it takes trust to be able to manage the kind of medical care that we need to do. And so if there is a new person coming in, which we do take new people, first and foremost, we'll bring them in the summer when it's calm, when the hormonal cycles are less testosterone, more prolactin, when we have the opportunity for a calmer wolf interaction. And we make that new person pick up scat. Not because it's some kind of a hazing ritual and say, oh, you're the new guy, you do the bad work. The reality is the scat bucket is a protector because we have conditioned the wolf psychologically to leave it alone. And that's a very important part that they maintain that. So that's what's going on. Kelly is trying to get the hay out of the frozen ice. And we've been starting to take hay out. Last week it was 50, and we're like, oh, we need to get this moldy hay out. Well, now that it's 20, and actually I was like 16 yesterday. And then we're going to have to have snow again. We've decided we'll leave the hay in. You know, again, risk assessment. You can't make a decision. A lot of people in wolf care think, oh, you just change your mind a lot. No, I have to rethink everything every day because things change. So we're going to give them this cover hay. We're going to leave this cover hay in. Once we get melting again and we get wet, then I worry about mold. Well, mold's not going to happen in 25 degrees. So we're going to work on trying to give them enough cover hay, especially these older joints, you know. And I always watch, again, how they're doing. how are they laying? And if they're choosing to lay in that hay, that typically means that this ice conditions, you know, again, a lot of people say, oh, wolves in the wild always lay in snow. Not compacted icicles, they don't, meaning that, you know, in the wild, you have snow that's spread out, you know, snow that's not, you know, compacted and has some insulating value. Here, because they're walking on it, it's compacted and lost all its insulating value. So a little posturing there. That was actually Grayson coming over doing a chin rest on Axel. Grayson, maybe it's the confidence of greeting Gryzor. Boy, Grayson's been, see that tail's got a little bit of a crook there and a little bit of hackles. That was because I'm not certain that Grayson's buying all that his brother has to offer. Grayson's starting to come in his own. You know, again, maturity with wolves typically happens between 18 to 24 months. But again, in the absence of a leader, sometimes wolves just say, you know what, I think I'm going to take a role. And sometimes I think pups are born into leadership based on, you know, certainly their behaviors and their focus. I think situational awareness is the biggest thing I see leaders, you know, wolves that pay attention to things. And that's definitely Grayson. He's always aware of what's going on. So let me get to a few more questions. Bolts is going back in the medical pen there. And so the question, have you ever had a raven nest on the IWC property? Yes. Ravens nest here a lot. I've seen it, and I have to be very careful because I do take out snags, hazard snag trees, big trees that I feel are at risk for coming down on the fence. Usually my fire management class from Vermilion comes over and we do a health assessment for the trees. And we always want to double check that we're not taking out a tree that's got a raven's nest. So I think in the 31 years I've been here, I think I've seen like 3 patterns. They're not as big as like eagle's nests, which are reused in a normal pattern, or maybe reused year after year after year, are huge. We've not had any eagle's nests in here, but I have had nests and I have had to be kind of cautious and look at timing, you know, before we take them down and make sure that there's nothing in there. But I think our biggest nesting tragedy was 2012 pups. Some of you who were on Pup Care may remember this, but we had a mother robin who was making very poor choices on where she was nesting. And those poor robin fledglings on their first flight, one of them flew right into Boltz's mouth. I think Luna attacked 2 others and didn't do very well in making some nesting choices. So sometimes I can't help the natural interactions that do occur on this exhibit. So a few other questions. So there's a question, how old would a female pup be when she decides which male she will be her companion? In our past experience, we actually had a dominant male who chose between 2 females. We had, in 2004, we had Maya and Nisa as the 2 females. And Maya and Nisa were 9 months old when Shadow selected Maya to be his mate. So it can happen younger than that. So there's a question again, by chance, if there is no female born, what long-term effects does that have on the pack? Again, I think these are all things, you know, that we, scenarios that we manage. There are some places that choose to manage only males. So there are other places that do that because females can be challenging. The female social behavior might be a little bit more intense because in the wild, females play a very active role in almost regulating population. And in wildlife management, we have something called intrinsic population control. Intrinsic population control means things that happen within, whether that be, you know, not like with wolves, not breeding, even males not having fertile breeding capabilities, you know, with only one certain time of the year. So in other words, no unwanted litters are going to happen. And behaviors can be intrinsic population controls. That means that females can be super dominant towards other females to prevent multiple litters from happening in a pack. Certainly some facilities say, you know, I don't want that female drama. And so they choose not to have males. And it works. Males tend to posture a lot more. So long-term implications are you going to get to see a little bit more of this kind of in-your-face, growling, posturing, jaw sparring, you know, harassment kind of things without a dominant pair kind of taking the active role to lead? Because the benefit of a dominant pair is that you have a male-female, and they both work cross genders. They both control. Plus, they are social, so they rally, they pair bond, they greet, they show, you know, kind of leadership, and everybody kind of gets excited. And the other thing I think I notice more, and I think this is really Axel's problem, he just doesn't like uncertainty. For me, the biggest challenge I have with Axel, and he pushes me a lot, he tests me a lot. He tries to jump on me and push me around. I've had 2 knee surgeries in the last, you know, 5 years. I had an elbow surgery in December. Every time I come in weak from some kind of a surgery, you know, his uncertainty about where I'm at is concerning to him. So that's why he pushes and he pushes and he tests. As soon as I get healthy again and I can roll him over and say, you know what, calm down. You know, I can still manage this pack. It's like having a supervisor who constantly is asking you, are you capable of doing your job? Are you capable of doing your job? And as soon as I roll him over and say, calm down, man, I'm still able to do my job, and he seems to be fine. And so we're working on that. And that's important. So Bolts is chewing on a piece of frozen beef here. And what's interesting, the other thing I wanted to say is that wolves do have the right, even though he's lowest ranking, if he guards that, if he possesses that, even though he's timid, he has the right to eat it. And this is an evolution of behaviors that comes from a pack of wolves who are all eating off of one carcass. There's a couple of key behaviors you might notice in your dogs. One of them is tug-of-war. You play tug-of-war with your dog. You ever notice how they get like super excited and they might even become aggressive? If you think about a pack of wolves, here they take down a deer. There's 6 of them on a deer. Somebody is going to grab a leg and pull and pull and pull and pull and tug that leg and that deer leg and be able to guard it and possess it. So the behavior of tug-of-war, but also the behavior of guarding, the lip curl, the threat display, food possession, which some people deal with their dog. They want to go take a bone away from their dog. What does their dog do? Do a lip curl and growls at them. Well, there are dogs. They're not supposed to do that, right? But in a wolf world, that's okay. Even if you're lower ranking, that's okay, because that seems to be part of that social behavior that allows them to get along. The reality is, you know what, I'm lower ranking, but I own this. This is my possession. Stay away. And you may have noticed when Bolts was possessing that, Axel, who'd been previously giving him grief, kept about a foot away, did not get in his face, did not steal it from him. That's, again, that difference between respecting dominance and domineering. Domineering is this kind of concept that we as humans created. You know, we're in your face, we're pushing you around, you know, and I think that's kind of this idea, I control you, I'm more dominant than you are. And I think that's where Dave really kind of went with this idea that alpha is not a great term, because that isn't how wolves usually function. In the wild, it's parents. It's parents who have leadership because they're parents, you know, and they show leadership and they show that pack, and it's their offspring that are living in their pack. We don't have that as much here because we choose to manage different subspecies and adopt wolves. But the reality is we still kind of have that respect, those respectful rules. And I think that's really important. So Kelly's doing what's important for our 12-year-old. One of the biggest challenges is the, you know, keeping a 12-year-old healthy. Denali's the oldest wolf that we ever had here. And so, not yet here in the exhibit, meaning obviously Gryzor is the oldest wolf we ever had. He's still here. So I can't use past tense. He's 16. But in the exhibit, usually by 10, everybody's retired. You know, life of retirement is better for these older animals. Denali wants to stay. And it's important that Denali stays for Bolts' sake, because Denali does help protect Bolts. And as if any were watching the webcam before I started, Bolts is all about Denali. Bolts was rolling over for him, licking him in the face, all excited. And so that was really important for us. But we are in a circumstance where, you know, we got to face the reality. You know, these hips, you can see these ligaments and tendons are starting to sag. And so that's a concern for us. And because he's not very good about taking meds, you know, he spits out most of his joint supplements. And so that's kind of an issue for us. So Kelly's job is to check him out, see if there's any kind of new growths, you know, rub those hips, try to just calm things down. and he likes it. Check their ears. You know, do we have any winter mites? Mites are kind of always that kind of problem. Oh, is there anything that we need to know? You know, and just let's keep their trust. We're about to vaccinate. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be putting a needle in that neck. So let's rub that neck and let's get them used to the feeling of having our hands around them. That's all part of that posture. So Betty asked, last week we're attempting to weigh Gryzor. Did you succeed? Yes. As a matter of fact, I actually put, and I know I'm kind of overwhelming YouTube with all these videos, but I put a short little clip. Excuse me, I've been talking too much here, but I put a short little clip on YouTube, just about a 1 or 2 minute clip that I put together that shows me in with Gryzor. I got him weighed in about less than a minute. Gryzor is 118. 125 was his August weight. 118 is a good weight for a 16-year-old, certainly at the end of winter. So we're happy with that. And I had to use a chicken wing to be able to bribe him, but I kind of know him. He knows me. He can't. It's funny to watch the wolves kind of take advantage of people. Well, it's not funny. I mean, obviously you want them all to be respectful, but the reality is every handler is different, and how they respect handlers is based on their interactions. Gryzor, he and I have been around the block. He knows, get on the scale. She's here. You know, whereas with Leon, it's like, oh, I can steal all the treats and get more treats. And I don't even have to get weighed. So, you know, again, I'm just being anthropomorphic now, which is applying human traits. But sometimes I think that's how they respond. So there's a question, what's the status of the pack medical check? The status is right now is the vet clinic is not allowed to do any non-emergency procedures. I think that's part of the stay-at-home order. I believe that's not for transfer of virus, but I believe that's for protection of emergency medical gear, from what I understand. So at this time, we can't do anything until we find more about the stay-at-home order. We could do it here. We're talking right now. We're not talking. I'm talking amongst myself, but I'm hoping to connect with the college. Has a vet tech program. They have X-ray machine there. They have capabilities, and so I'm trying to see if it's possible for us to work with the college in that scenario. And I haven't talked to the vets about this yet. Obviously, the vets would need to come. We're not circumventing the vets. We would just see if they'd be willing to come to the college, if that's a possibility. But if it is, in fact, about surgical gear, then obviously the college shouldn't be using their surgical gear as well. Anyway, so that's kind of what we know about the drugging. At zoos, they condition animals for blood work. Yeah, we are aware of that. We actually... So the question was, at zoos, they just condition them to take their blood. I think they do that a lot with a lot of animals. I am in conversation with Wolf Park, who does that with some of their wolves, but as they've done with our training, not all of their wolves. And I would say if you check with most zoos, not every zoo is doing blood work. And again, there's a difference. And I think I want to make sure that people understand. There is a difference in how you manage a socialized pack of wolves. That are wolves that are bottle fed, where you take away their fear of people and you get them to trust you. That's what we manage here. Zoos that manage non-socialized wolves, meaning wolves that have no response in their critical bonding period to trust people, are a much safer animal to manage from the standpoint that they're afraid of people. They see people, they run, or they distance themselves. Fight or flight response is what we call it. They give a flight response that's 20 feet or 50 feet or 10 feet, depending upon the facility. But the reality is they don't trust people. Or we manage a socialized exhibit. We want them to trust us. And so a non-socialized exhibit, they could capture a wolf in a net and not have to drug it, meaning just sit on it, catch it in a net and hold it and get a blood sample, not immobilize it. And then they let it go, and then that's how you capture it. If you can imagine wolves that we hand vaccinate, that we have to trust, and we hold them down in a net, we've lost our trust. And so that's the challenge of a socialized exhibit. Wolf Park, down in Battleground, Indiana, they are one of our facilities that we look to for advice. they do condition their pups from a very young age to manage and accept blood draws, socialized wolves, to accept blood draws. And they said not everybody is willing to accept it. It depends upon the individual. So we are prepared for our next pup cycle to incorporate some of that. One of the reasons why we had to kind of reevaluate how we did pup care is because we're trying to do all these initiatives. And these initiatives included, research on pup behavior, how wolves, respond to different novel stimuli. And that kind of requires us to have some control and have some consistency. And that's really hard with, again, the way that we kind of have managed pups in the last 3 or 4 cycles. Well, we have a lot of people coming in. We lose that ability to control things and to be able to have consistency. So I think for me, if I'm going to get a wolf that accepts me to draw their blood, and importantly, I can do it with the management of the pack. Now, what you witnessed there while I started talking was Denali was getting some focus from Kelly. Grayson, who's got some issues with Denali, saw that as an opportunity to take advantage of him and do a grab bite from behind, and did a predatory grab bite and charged Denali. Denali charged him, and that's all kind of about the competition issue. Those two have a history. And if any of you were here when poor Grayson joined this exhibit, Denali did a fair amount of dominance posturing towards Grayson that kind of has some history. So that's my answer to that. Again, I know a lot of zoos that do management. Again, socialized wolves, different than non-socialized. And I would hope, again, that people recognize there are trade-offs, pros and cons of everything. And because we manage the wolves this way, if we were to switch to a non-socialized exhibit, we wouldn't mix them, meaning we would not have socialized wolves with non-socialized wolves, because what ended up happening, the socialized wolves would approach the human because that's how they were bottle fed and raised, and the non-socialized wolves might say, oh, my wolf might align with those wolves and approach, but they don't have a bond with the human, so then they, may not have kind of the same relationship with them and just, be caught up in group dynamics that might make it more dangerous for the handler. So to me, socialized management is more dangerous for the handler, because when you take away their fear of people, you're left with the wolf. And the wolf that tests, a wolf that has confidence and issues, that can have threat displays, wolves that can be guarding of each other, whereas a non-socialized exhibit, you walk in, the wolves run the other way, pretty much, that takes that risk away. So that's my long, convoluted answer about that. But yeah, we talked to Karen Davis down at Wolf Park about, boy, how do you do that? And she said, just consistency, managing, everybody does things exactly the same way. And so that's why we need to make sure of that. So there's a question, what is bone dust? I talk about it a lot. I would like to say bone dust is probably best defined like the sawdust from a meat cutter. So when you cut with a saw, you have sawdust. When you cut meat with a saw, you have bone dust. So it's ground bone, it's ground fat, it's whatever the grocery store is cutting. We are extremely grateful. We have 2 grocery stores in Ely. Zupp's grocery store has been providing me bone dust actually since 1986. When I first started working with wolves, I contacted the meat department and said, hey, do you have any meat left over? And they said, hey, we get this on the saw. We can save this for you. And they do. Been doing it since 1986. That's amazing. Recently, we started with Ely Northland Market. They save us bone dust as well. But what also the grocery stores do is we do buy chicken because we need it for Gryzor and we need it as mid-week. Sometimes we buy pork because Gryzor's spoiled and he likes a pork roast. But they also have things that are post-dated, no longer for human consumption. We can use that. We can freeze it. We obviously are concerned about salmonella the same way anybody is. But when we freeze it and we feed it out right away, or we feed frozen, then we don't have that issue. So that's Axel just did a raised leg urination. That's another behavior. I think that's a question that I had based on the descriptions of Grayson's Axel behavior. Would you consider Grayson's behavior more strategic? I believe Grayson is outthinking all of us. He's the Einstein of the wolf world. I watch that wolf think, and I've watched that since he's been a pup. He likes to sit back, watch the world around him, and I swear he's got the facial expressions of a wolf who's already got things mapped out a month in advance. I think he should be running the COVID response myself, because Grayson's got I think he's got 3 or 4 different scenarios worked out in his head, just about every experience that he has. It's amazing to watch how each individual wolf is different. That's one of the benefits of socialized wolves, is I get to see that personality. Axel, beautiful looking wolf, but sometimes he just stares, and, squirrel is a great analysis for Axel. It's like, oh, I was doing something, but let me go do something else. So there's not a lot of thought process sometimes. We see that because he gets pretty excited. And that's good for us, because we know he can be easily distracted. Doesn't take much to ring a bell and throw in a deer hide. And next thing you know, Axel forgot that he was in the middle of dominating bolts and decides he's going to go check out what's going on. Grayson, on the other hand, it's like, oh, Denali did something? Let me put that in my memory bank, and I'll deal with that on a Tuesday when he's not looking. So that's my take on it. So Deb asked, does the human interaction between the wolves and the caretakers take some of the wild out of the wolves? I don't think so. I personally, I hope people respect these wolves for the instincts that they have. I personally don't. I can't. That's every human's value, I guess. If people think that they're less because we care for them, then I'm sorry that I'm not doing my job in showing the incredible personalities and the incredible behaviors that exist because they function in the wild. Meaning that social behavior is not, I hear people say, oh, they're friendly just like dogs. No, dogs are friendly just like wolves, meaning your dogs are your best friend because they came from a social carnivore. The reality is, I think that's really important. So Missy, thank you. The book is Wolves, Behavior, Ecology, and Conservation. Thank you. That's the book that I couldn't remember the title. I've got it on my desk. Actually, I read it many, many times. I don't have it on my desk now, but I read it many, many times. And I've read, again, the benefit of that is that it's behavior, but there's more to it. Wolf behavior is more about ecology and how they adapt in their natural environment and the hormones that have evolved to make those things happen. So that's what I think about it. Again, I see predatory drive on dogs. And so I don't think that's been diminished by any means. So, again, Fred says, I hunt wolves, I give them lead. Lead, I see. So Fred's joined in from a perspective that is a part of wolf management, and there's no doubt. I see I read it as lead. So he's saying that he hunts wolves, and that is something that the wolf management has been a discussion in Minnesota. Minnesota wolves were delisted in 2012 when the population was felt to be recovered. So the way that wolves are managed as a species that is under the Endangered Species Act, but Minnesota wolves were listed as endangered in 73. By 78, they were threatened, meaning downgraded. They weren't truly endangered. The population was maybe 300 or 400 up here in the north. And then the Minnesota population started expanding, and they delisted it, or not delisted, but they downgraded it from endangered to threatened. So then in 2012, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, well, actually in 1992, the Fish and Wildlife Service was, as part of the Endangered Species Act, was ordered to write a recovery plan. And that recovery plan was, how many wolves do you want in Minnesota? And so the Minnesota population was deemed to be recovered if it had a population, again, extending in kind of this region of the Great Lakes with about 1,300 wolves was, I think, what the 92 recovery plan was. Well, it reached that. It reached that in the late 80s. And so then the wolf was delisted. And so there are people that have been able to hunt wolves in Minnesota. The DNR had a season 2012, 2013, 2014, and then in December 2014, there was a lawsuit, and the wolves were then relisted to the endangered species list. So hunting of wolves does occur in the northwestern population, Yellowstone being exempt as a national park, but parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. So that is a culture. Obviously, some of these Canadian wolves that we feature here, the Arctic, even though it's remote, there are, wolves have different levels of population control, even in Alaska. So that comment there from Fred, wolves are being able to be hunted. So, so the other question, is there any jealousy shown when someone gives another wolf attention or the other wolf wants attention? And I go back to this statement that I heard from ethologist Eric Klinghammer, founder of Wolf Park. I remember Eric, and actually I think it was, sorry, I'm old and I forget things. But anyways, it was a phrase that said, jealousy is a human emotion. And so the concept of jealousy, when we say that animals are jealous, it means that there's a cognitive kind of ability. And I stray the line here sometimes when I try to interpret behavior, because I'm a human. Humans, we are like that. But the reality is that the behavior of wolves is probably more dictated by what allows them, what's beneficial for their survival. And I remember Eric telling me once, he said, practice paying attention to dead air, meaning nothing in front of you. You're rubbing it up, you're talking to it, you're expressing that emotion to nothing. The wolf will act the same way. Like, it'll run over and it'll try to get your attention, whether there was a wolf there or not. So in other words, how can somebody be jealous of dead air? They're not responding to the other wolf. They're responding to your expression, to your body language, to your communication, and in some cases, the pitch of your voice. So, people who come home and their dogs have gotten in their garbage and they're like, oh, my dog knows it did bad. Maybe your dog does. I don't know the cognitive ability of animals. I grew up on a dairy farm. I often thought that milk cows knew more than they let on. But the reality is, if you come in and you say, what did you do, in a deep voice, and you have a furrowed brow and you have a tense, body posture because you're about to clean up debris that you don't want to, they're picking up on that. And it may be more about your expression than it is about their cognitive ability to know that they did right or wrong. That's where we get into this moral kind of idea. So, so the one last question, and I think I'll wrap it up. Aside from hunting, what other methods have humans used to convince wolves to stay away from livestock? There's a question, I could have sworn I saw someone using an inflatable tube man. Yeah, there's no doubt those inflatable tube maps freak out wolves. Anything that flaps in the wind. As a matter of fact, you go all the way back to Russian hunters who would use like fladry, flapping burlap bags to even drive wolves into pit traps. The fladry is flapping flags. So this is a neophobic species, meaning that novel stimuli, new stimuli is startling to them. So farmers that I know that have been successful, and there's a lot of publications out there about what I call non-lethal control measures, sirens, lights, radios, things that are different in their environment. The thing is, you got to mix it up. If you do the same thing every day, meaning I've got wolves, I'm going to put on a radio. Well, 6 days into it, well, that radio, I've been standing here watching that radio and nothing's happened, so I'm going to go after that sheep anyways, is a problem. Meaning conditioning and ignoring things because they've been exposed to things for a while means that you've got to mix it up. And so you talk to farmers who might use electric fences, might use fladry, they might use livestock guarding dogs, they might use lead, if it's legal, meaning, shooting over the heads if it's legal, shooting into the body if it's not. Those are all techniques. But obviously, non-lethal control measures, we try to get people to deal with their issues. And you've got to recognize that American farmers, it's not just wolves. They're taking losses from other things like coyotes. They're taking losses from, other, might be bobcats, might be, in some cases lynx, but that's not usually in farm country. But there's losses. But the other thing that you got to recognize, farmers are taking losses from deer themselves, from elk that get into pastures and crops. And so so to look at only one issue of livestock depredation, it's emotional. There's no doubt it is emotional having your livestock killed. I mean, I grew up on a farm. I bottle-fed calves. You know, I can tell you when you lose a calf, you know, you have that expression of emotion. That's what farmers do. And so what is challenging is when you have a circumstance where other parts of depredation, which can be almost as costly or more costly in some cases, combined with a loss of cows or something like that, or calves, that it adds up. And so that's where it gets to be a real problem. So, so I think that's how we're going to kind of end. And so thanks again for watching. Again, we'll continue to do this service as long as we are on a stay-at-home order and our facility is closed. So looks like I'll be extending this through for sure for May 4th. That's been the directive from our governor, that May 4th is now the extension of the stay-at-home order. And so I will continue to do these every Friday. Please, if you have questions in advance, or if you feel like I didn't adequately answer a question, by all means, send me an email personally at curate@wolf.org. I work 5 days a week, so I'm able to answer things. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to share some things. And if Tony is watching, I have not seen Tony log in or ask a question. I have 2 periodicals waiting for Tony, Tony B., who asked me about Sami population in Sweden, issues with wolves and conflict with livestock and their way of life, and also about dire wolves. I do my research, and I've got a couple of periodicals I'd love to share. So Bolts is doing a little bit of demonstration about this kind of relationship between the ravens and the wolves. So we'll leave it at that. And like I said, all that posturing, it was probably about the food issue this morning that made him try to find some power in that medical pen. But for right now, he's managing his own. And to all you dog owners, I challenge you at your, with your time at home, when you have your dog full attention, take a chance and write some things down. What do you notice? And, I challenge you to go to any kind of resource and find out what's the function of that behavior in the wild. Why does my dog do a lip curl when I walk up to its food bowl? First of all, it shouldn't be, but, think about 6 animals sitting on a carcass. Think about Tug-of-War. Think about, the things that you're watching in your dogs, and learn a little bit about the ancestors of your dogs. So thanks again, and we appreciate all of the time, and everybody stay safe and hopefully stay respected in your communities, and we'll see you all next Friday.